welcome to this month's Gordon Report. I forgot where we are. We're doing so many of these. Hello, Ed.
Yeah.
Great to see you again. It's been
Good to see you too, Ira.
a couple months. We're still living in this never normal world, and we were just chatting before the show, before we got started here, that we are, in some regards, in some ways, this is reminiscent of things that we've seen in the past, which should be good news to anybody, that it's somewhat of a cycle, but there are certain events that are occurring right now that are very, very different than they've ever been in the past. And for those that just think they're going to ride this thing out and come out on the other side and sit it out and wait, are going to be in for a big surprise. And this is probably the moment that you and I have been writing about for years. In fact, last night I was at a graduation dinner for my first cohort that's going through the master's program in leadership. And they sat down with one next to me was seated one of the students, the student's mother, and she happens to be a chief financial officer at one of the universities. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about things, and I was surprised. I mean, what they don't know about demographics, how they're shifting. And there's so many other events that are happening, and they're a very respected university, and so the conversation just goes on. I've been speaking at a lot of conferences, and I know you're out there all the time, and people just are they're a bit naive about how complicated and complex and how this environment is just very, very different than anything in the past.
But on the other hand, there are some positive signs that in the reshoring area now, we see a lot of companies in smaller markets setting up new manufacturing and starting to train workers. So there are some signs that the climate is changing, and the whole idea of collaboration between business and communities to retrain workers and fill these vacant jobs, we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really excited today. We've got Michelle Collins, which was someone that you've worked with her organization in the past.
Yes.
ConxusNEO, which is Northeast Ohio, on your Retain. And Ed, you've been talking about Retain since, I think that's how I met you 20 years ago or so. You were talking about Retains. This has been your life's work. Just to let everybody know, explain what a retain is.
Well, a retain is basically a partnership hub. It acts as an intermediary between businesses and communities. So it works with school systems. It works with workforce boards, chambers of commerce, economic development commissions, small, medium, and large businesses. And it's an alliance of all of those in an attempt to first retrain workers for vacant jobs and better keep workers up to date so that businesses are more productive. And then also trying to help prepare the next generation of students for the jobs of the fourth industrial revolution. So we have a bigger pool of people coming into the workforce that are ready to learn.
So I'm going to tee this up. We're going to bring Michelle on because she's done this. Her organization has done this. They're certainly working in the middle of the Rust Belt, in an environment, a state, a community that was impacted for the last 20, 30, 40 years about this. And they're very successfully doing this. So this is hopefully will be a good lesson. Hopefully or anybody that's listening today or watching this even later on will be able to pick up some tips and solutions and ideas and learn from someone who's done it in the past. I just want to share this one thing, though, before we bring her on to set this up. There were two things that have happened. I mentioned the one last night, and I was just sort of surprised that, listening to a university leader not fully being aware of what the environment is going to be, what the demographics are going to be. But also, and this is just a very impactful trend, in the 60s and 70s, there were 2.5 million new workers. It was the baby boomers. It was us, Ed. We were at the leading edge of that. But for almost 2 decades, there were 2.5 million new workers, fresh blood, coming into the workforce every year. Not everybody was qualified, everybody was skilled, not everybody was a great worker, but there was a lot of bodies. And then in the 80s, the economy dipped a little bit, and we had Gen X coming into the workforce. So there was still bodies, but we still had baby boomers. And then we had the millennials, and the millennials was even a larger generation. And we had another 2.5 million new workers coming into the workforce for almost 2 decades into the 90s and in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, because of the lower fertility rates, because of no immigration, we have under 500,000 new workers coming into naturally organic people coming into the workforce. At the same time, the baby boomers are going away, and as I mentioned, there's virtually no immigration. So part of the challenge is we have our population's doubled over the last 70 years. The baby boomers are dying, exiting the workforce, cutting back.
Yes.
And then there's a whole lot of other issues which we don't want to go into, that we can't go into right just today.
Well, and the baby boomers, that's 70 million people retiring this decade. So if you average that 7 million people leaving the workforce,
you cut off the trailing end of that. So we need programs like Retain. So let's bring on Michelle. We're going to bring her back in. Good afternoon at this point, Michelle. Thank you for being here. It's exciting. You're part of an organization called ConxusNEO, which is Northeast Ohio. Tell us a little about the history of it. And I know you're now the executive director of that. Congratulations on the promotion.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Ed and Ira, for extending the invitation today. And I'm really glad to be here. ConxusNEO, Ed, you pretty much did our intro for us. We're really an organization focused on Northeast Ohio, specifically serving Summit County, which is the Akron area. And we're focused on connecting system partners so that we can build that thriving workforce that we aspire for. And that work started, the organization was rebranded back in 2015, 2016. So we'd been around for maybe 15 years, and we owned the public workforce system building. And so we were often confused as we're the public workforce system, and that wasn't the case, because the work that we're really focused on is systems change work in that workforce development space, right? We want to ensure that our partners get different results, because if they continue to do the same things, they're going to get the same results. So it was less for us about running programs and more about convening those partners that Ed mentioned. So convening the employers, the educators, the workforce programs, including the public sector, along with a lot of different community organizations that have added training programs so that we could not only fill today's positions, but we could think, how do we build that talent pipeline to fill future positions?
So what was the appeal then? Why did they cooperate with you to do this?
Well, thank you for asking that question. As I mentioned, there was some confusion initially. Is Conexus the public workforce system, or are they not? No, we're not Ohio Means Jobs. We're not the Workforce Development Board. That's not our role. So back in 2015, the county executive at the time, Russ Pry, he really identified this need in our community that we've got to address workforce utilizing an employer-driven approach. So oftentimes programs were built based on what the community assets were, the community organizations, what they envisioned a workforce program might look like. And he had a different vision for our organization. So really, we need an organization that can be out there, be that neutral convener, first starting with understanding the skills that the employers need and bringing that group together to work together to develop innovative solutions, with the employer really leading the work. So, the impetus of our work was, the vision that County Executive Pry had. And we got off the ground up and running rather quickly in this space. We had manufacturers, which very important to our community is manufacturing and healthcare. Those are our top industries here. And those manufacturers were like, to your point earlier, Ed, thinking about shrinking demographics, really concerned individuals weren't going into manufacturing.
Right.
So initially, a small network of manufacturers, they went into our communities, our urban district, school district, went in there and started offering up tours, get those students out, let's see industry. They went to football games at night, on Friday nights, trying to talk to students and talking to families. And we got some really good momentum. We started to see more students interested. And so from there, the work really emerged, really took off. In fact, we partnered with that school district to help them identify what are the in-demand occupations, because they were going through a transformation where they wanted to be able to enroll every student in a career technical education pathway. So we could take the labor market information into the school district to inform what those pathways were. We could bring employers to the table to be part of the steering committee and to help this transformation. And so I think our community had a lot of excitement, a lot of interest in the transformation that was going on in the school district. And we just continued to grow and add more partners, community organizations, other training providers, colleges, community colleges, four-year institutions.
Did you encounter much, many smaller manufacturers are reluctant to invest money in training, either their current workers or to do entry-level job training, let's say, let alone career ed. How did you overcome that resistance?
I would say the ability for our employers to collaborate and the trust that they built amongst each other initially was really exciting. And it really just set the stage for how employers can work together. And never once did we ask employers to invest in the work. Give us time, give us talent with the work. And from there, we received a U.S. Department of Labor grant so that we could utilize those funds to support employers to develop their employees. So we leveraged public workforce dollars, right? There's a lot of training dollars that unfortunately our employer partners didn't know about.
Right.
So getting them connected to the resources.
Did once those resources ran out, did they start investing their own money when they saw success?
Yeah, I would say that we've seen an influx of employers who are investing in tuition reimbursement. We're seeing more and more employers who are investing in that. And honestly, we have a lot of momentum in our community right now around apprenticeships, around internships that need to be paid internships, because our students in our community, they're contributing to their family household. And so they have to have an experience that's paid. And so I do think that the employers have been willing to invest, whether it's their own training dollars, the bucket of money maybe they've set aside, or leveraging public workforce dollars, or a lot of federal grants have come into our community and leveraging those funds as well.
Michelle, there's a lot of communities and regions right now that are really struggling to figure this out. There is as we talked about, it's not only the demographics, but there's skill gaps and a lot of other areas. If you had to roll the clock back, 10, 12, 15 years, what lessons that you learned that if you had an opportunity to do it again, to do it over, that you could, rather than trial and error, that you can advise other organizations, other regions how to jumpstart this?
Well, great question. We have a meeting next week to help another community in Ohio start something like this. And we've been reflecting on, what are some of our lessons learned? What would we do differently? And honestly, I'm so proud of our industry sector partnerships and the way the employers have come together. And I think that I can't understate how important it is to build trust with your partners.
Yes.
You've got to spend time with them. You need to truly understand what are their pain points. It's not that, right? We're focused on systems change because if we keep doing the same thing, we keep getting the same results. So it's having candid conversations, but you can't have that candid conversation on day one. It takes time, right? So
Yes.
building trust with your partners so that they understand it really is your intent to help them reach their program outcomes, their workforce outcomes. So it's not, Ira, that I would say we need to do something differently. I can't underscore how important it is to take time. Don't jump right in. I will admit, I would say one of my challenges was working with a community organization initially and thinking, in my mind, why wouldn't you do this work? But I hadn't spent enough time with this leader to understand it just didn't align with his mission. And so then spending time and working together, and now that organization is one of our greatest partners. So again, just spending time, meeting your partners where they are, understanding what they can contribute, and understand where maybe they just lack the bandwidth or the capacity. It's not that they don't want to. It just may be that they have some other challenges internally that they've got to work through.
Have you found that the communication between the business people and the educators and the community leaders sometimes is a vocabulary problem where they mean the same thing, but they express it in different ways?
Absolutely. Don't all of our industries have our own jargon and we just lose people, right? So it's, again, understanding your audience and meeting them where they are. And I think that that's the beauty of industry sector partnerships is to get everyone in the same room, having these open conversations, clarifying questions to make sure we truly understand one another. I recall some challenges where we would have employers say, why can't educators just do da 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 da, right? And educators are like, well, we have these standards, right? It wasn't excuses. It was just both parties not clearly understanding the limitations, what they could do, what they couldn't do, but where there was room to be nimble, to be flexible.
You know, a lot of business people would say, well, that's great, Michelle, but show me the quantity, give me the data. Show me how these companies have profited. Have you been able to get the businesses or educators to come up with data showing how, well, we've eliminated the dropout rate from high school. We've filled more vacant jobs, and it's resulted in this amount of more money for the company, better profit, or more kids coming out of high school and they're doing better now in their education. Have you been able to gather any of that hard data?
Well, I appreciate you asking that question because you touched on I would say one of our weak points that we're currently building. So we recently partnered with an economic development organization to really develop out what are the metrics that our community is most interested in so that we understand, is our community making progress?
Mm-hmm.
And right. So are we filling that skills gap? Are we minimizing it? And we've just begun that work this past year. So we're looking at finalizing those metrics, creating that baseline so that we can see from year to year. So while we haven't quantified, right, we haven't been able to say, it's impacting it, but this much economic impact at the time. It's on our radar. And we are confident, now we have students graduating from our largest school district. Each and every student will have been a part of a career technical education pathway.
Right.
So they've had 4 classes that align with industry. They've been out in the businesses. They've gained hands-on experiences. Maybe they've done the summer camp that aligns with the industry sector that they're interested in. So we've got to believe that this exposure and these new hands-on experiences are, first of all, helping students gain exposure to industries and jobs they never even heard of before, right?
Yes.
But also that they're building those partnerships and those relationships with those employers. and that they're able to demonstrate their interest in, it's a two-way street. The employers are investing in the students while the students are gaining that early on exposure to see, is this for me?
Yeah, if you can give the short-term impact of filling a vacant job that's costing company money because they can't, their productivity is not good, they're losing business because they can't fill these jobs, that's short-term. And then the long-term part with the development of the student population for the future of filling these fourth industrial revolution jobs that we're in the middle of. And that's really the sales pitch that we market with retains, that it does a short term and long term. And right now, the focus is so much on short term response. You got 15,000 vacant jobs, you just said, in your town, in your region. We need to show the impact of Conexus on that. Of course, that's a moving target. As more people retire, you may have more vacant jobs. So you are filling them, but more of them are being created too. So
absolutely. And Ed, we really have spent some time understanding our labor shortage. To your point, yeah, we have 15,000 open positions right now in our community. But since the onset of the pandemic, we have 20,000 fewer people in jobs.
Right.
And we know that, yes, it's a shrinking demographic. We have to acknowledge the impact the death of COVID had on working age adults. We are experiencing an opiate crisis in our community. Yes. We had individuals leave the workforce because they had children or elders, family members that they needed to take care of. So there's all of these things that are in play right now.
Michelle, that's the message that I'm out there every week talking about. In addition to just the normal demographics, how many baby boomers are retiring, how many people are coming in the workforce. We have this reskilling and upskilling gap. Within that, we still have more and more people needing to go to college, or at least parents and employers feel that they need to go to college. They get a 4-year degree, an advanced degree, and there's certain roles they do. I mean, if you're going into medicine or if you want to be a dentist, a physician, an attorney, an accountant, an engineer, an architect, yes, we want them to get their training. But just this morning, I mean, in contrast to what I heard last night, attending a graduation dinner for a master's program, is that the projection within the next 3 years, it seems like it's far way out. Ed, when you and I, and Michelle, I assume we just met this morning, but when I first started talking about this, 2025 seemed like an eternity. It's like, well, we won't have to worry about that. We won't be around. By 2025, we're going to have a shortage of 400,000 welders. 400,000 welders. Now, I remember this conversation over 20 years ago when I was living in another part of Pennsylvania, and they had a school there that they literally can train welders for free. It was a grant, a school, and they literally had to go to Philadelphia. We were an hour and a half out of Philadelphia to find students to fill those positions. But every student that was graduating at that point was starting at $60,000 or $80,000, some even at $100,000. Here's the big challenge. There's a whole lot of money that's going to flow into our economy for infrastructure.
Yeah.
And right at the time that we have this infrastructure, a necessity, but a push, there's not going to be bodies to do that. And if the incentives are to get that done, then private industry and public is going to be short on welding. And that's just one job. I mean, that's a lot of people. At the same time that the labor participation rate for males is imploding. Yeah. And again, just another stat, the number of males under 30 who are living are not married jumped from 30% 10 years ago to 70%. So they don't have BAs because they're not going to college. I mean, so this is prime. They're able to do that.
Right.
But they also don't have the needs because they don't own homes. They're not married. They don't have kids. They don't have college debt.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of people we can tap if
Yes.
the messaging would be different, and we offer them skills, because crap, as a welder, to come
Yeah.
out and start at $80,000, $100,000, and it's just an upward career. It's just so different, and
Yeah.
you mentioned before, it's like, why can't you get why can't you get organizations and parents and schools interested?
Well, Michelle, we estimate there are 30 million people out there who are trainable right now, who are not being trained. They've learned how to learn. They could fill these vacant jobs. And we throw all these numbers around, I think, guys. And after a while, people just turn it off because they've heard so much doom and gloom. They've heard so many bad things. But these are real numbers. And the key, here's my question to you, Michelle. How do you find these enlightened leaders in business, education, and community programs who get the message and just don't turn off and say, systemic change, that's a threat to me. I have to make my profit. I have to meet my state mandates. I don't want to. The enemy is business. The enemy is education. The enemy is nonprofits. I have to protect my turf.
Well, I want to share with you two examples in regards to what we saw. One school district, our community at the onset of the pandemic, our long-term care employers were greatly impacted, right? And they said, we are in dire need of nursing assistants. They're leaving the field left and right.
Yes.
It's the onset of the pandemic. We need them now more than ever. We rallied the community together to say, okay, what can we do as a community? And so we set a goal. Let's get 125 individuals into training between now and middle of 2023. We're sitting at 80, and we're really pleased with that progress, quite frankly. And one of the things we're excited about is because one of our school districts said, okay, we have students who are enrolled, but we have family members who are sitting at home. So what they did is they connected with those family members, and they would get 1, 2, 10, 20 family members enrolled in training, right? So it was trying something different to say, okay, we're going to reach out to the families because we know those family members really do want to be role models for their children. So let's create opportunity. So we moved 80 individuals who may have been sitting at home on their couch into some training, into employment. And that's just one example. We're currently, go ahead.
Who did the reaching out?
It was the school district.
Okay.
It was something different versus, we're just going to, reach out to our existing students. They thought beyond that. They thought.
Why did they do it? Why did the school district do it?
Why did they do it? Again,
yeah,
we heard how important nursing assistants. So what we did is we surveyed some nursing assistants to understand, why are you leaving, right? And one of the things we heard is that at the end of the day, though, they want to be role models for their children. So it provided insight to say, wow, how do we reach those family members? And the school district was more than willing to go out and connect with. So we were really excited about that. Last week, we had a conversation about some promising grassroots work that's being done in the state of Ohio that we want to do here locally. So it's been almost a year ago, we had some councilwomen out knocking on doors, going out into the neighborhoods, reaching individuals because we had a large employer coming to town and they wanted to share about this new opportunity. And so it created some really strong hires for that company. So then we broadened it. We brought in some other employers. And it also informed us that, we got some feedback from some folks that said, yeah, that's our largest employer in our community, but man, their application is too hard to complete. And so people would abort the application process. Well, that wasn't acceptable to the company. So they invested millions of dollars in refining their application so that it was easier, right? So I think by doing some grassroots efforts, by engaging your partners in ways that are different outside of the box, I mean,
Yes.
those are just some examples of how we reach people and get them better connected to training and employment.
Good.
Michelle, I love that you talked about that because, I mean, that's for the last 6 years. My book came out, Recruiting in the Age of Googlization, and we have an acronym. It's REACH. It's how do you reach people? How do you engage them?
Yes.
The A is application. And this, by the way, the C is communication. The H is hiring and onboarding. But the application is in many organizations, especially companies that have been around a while or that target frontline entry-level employees. Their application is a leftover from the 1950s and 60s. They just happen to put it online. So the abandonment rate is atrocious. I mean, it's as high as 90%. So one is if you can get them to apply and then recognize that, hey, 9 out of 10 people who want to apply that started the application drop out. And most companies don't track that. So I love that you share that. We usually don't hear it coming from workforce development and everything. It's we got good people and the programs and so forth, but the fact that you're reaching down and helping
Yes.
businesses to that level is just outstanding. We unfortunately are coming up pretty close to the end. This was incredibly insightful. And a lot of good tips, and hopefully our listeners and those listening live or in the future, I'm sure they'll get a lot out of it. But so we have the website up front on the banners, ConxusNEO.com. Is that the best way to reach you? Are there other ways that they can do that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you'd be open to having conversations. You said you're helping another community.
Absolutely. That community of practice, creating that community of learning is so important to us at Conexus. We do it all the time. We hear something awesome working out in Pennsylvania, over in Texas. We bring that information to our local employers, and we've been really pleased to see some of them adopt practices that we learn outside of our own community. So we would love to engage in any type of communication conversation.
Michelle, I've worked across your state, and there are certainly some other communities I could refer to you that could listen to your message. All right.
Appreciate it. And Michelle, there's always one last question, and I forgot to ask it before. We ask this at the end of every one of our podcasts. Was there something that we should have asked you that we didn't?
Well, you talk about that typical interview question. I think you had really great questions. I really appreciate it. And I think that just being mindful that we've got amazing assets within our community. And so at our organization, we're mindful that we are not reproducing any existing workforce programs. We're trying to strengthen the capacity of our existing workforce where there's any gaps. And again, this work only gets done because strong partnerships, which come from taking time to listen and build relationships.
Right. Very good. We'll talk again soon, Michelle.
Great. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a good weekend. Take care. Thanks. Well, Ed, that was one of, I think, for me, that was one really, really enjoyable. It was a great conversation.
Yes.
And a lot of good insights, just practical tips, and basic and so basic. And every community is under the gun. I mean, Ohio's and Pennsylvania, we're all in the Rust Belt, but Ohio, Pennsylvania.
They had Goodyear. They had Goodyear, and that, of course, is almost gone there. So
I'm living, nearby Bethlehem, and lost the steel, Pittsburgh. But it doesn't matter where you are in the country. I mean, I have clients in Arizona and Texas and Florida and the Dakotas, and everybody you talk to is say, you don't understand what it's like around here. It's really, really difficult. So every community has a need to be able to do this. It's going to be different in every community.
The difficulty is when you talk about systemic change. They start running to the hills.
On the promising side, though, I will tell you that you've been talking about the impending storm. I've been talking about the perfect labor storm.
It's here
for years. And you're right. It was about systemic change, and we've got time and we can figure it out. And that may be happening somewhere. It's not going to happen here. It won't happen in our industry. Right. The thing that I've noticed, and maybe it was because of the pandemic, but the thing that I've noticed is that there are more heads nodding There are more people coming up afterwards and talking about it. And they
Yes.
go, the way you packaged it. And yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yes.
The writing was on the wall. We didn't
Yes.
listen, but
Yes.
you've got our ear now. What can we do? And some people are looking for that quick fix, that
Yes.
holy grail, which there isn't one, because it's going to take systemic
Well,
change.
tell them to call me, and I'll be happy to help them. All right, I mean it.
Yeah,
I mean
absolutely.
it.
And
Because
again, there's some great models. You've
yeah,
had, this is just
yeah,
one,
I
example
know.
of a retained,
Well,
very successful.
Ira, I've been on this for a long time,
You have been.
and I'm getting to the point where everyone is talking about it, but no one now. Conexus is trying to do something. They seem to unfortunately be out there in a community that wants to do something and not just say no, we can't do. Inflation's going up, we're laying off people, et cetera, et cetera.
We've heard that before, but there's a lot of communities. We can't fix everybody. You can lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Right.
But there's a lot of organizations that are receptive, and they have never heard of a retain.
I know.
They've tried different things, and so we're doing our best to get the message out there. And
I appreciate it.
Let me change the fact. I got to go up. Let me change our banner here. Whoops! Don't know why it's not working there. There we are.
Okay.
So we'll get Michelle off there. And if you want to reach Ed, you can go to imperialcorp.com, get the Gordon report, reach out to him. And again, wealth of information. And it's good to see you. We'll be back next month, I believe. In November,
Yes.
we have somebody. And then in December. So we've got 2 more episodes for 2022. Hard to believe. We're wrapping up the year. But we'll have further discussions. If anybody has any questions for Ed, for our guests, or for me, please reach out to us. Until then, as I close all the podcasts, don't let the shift hit your plans.
Right. Bye-bye.